We are back. Welcome back, everyone, to Sabres Chat with myself, Luka. It has been a while for this particular show. I do apologize for anyone. I know it's not exactly the most listened to show, but I do see everyone that does listen. I appreciate anyone that listens, comments, tweets at me, anything, positive and negative, especially with the Sabres. I understand negative's going to come. That's the nature of the beast, everything like that. I love it. It's the nature of both the uh beginning of this podcast journey that I and someone else, Josh, if you follow along with Bill's chat, have gotten into. It's the origin of why we did it because we just love talking in that regard the Bills. And then the reason I do this is because, as Josh has even said on that show, the Sabres are kind of my true number one, just because hockey has always had this thing closer to me as a sport. Just it's something I've always loved watching as a fan. I love playing in any capacity possible. It's always been that thing. So first and foremost, appreciate all of you. Um, it's good to be back. There's been a lot, personal. Obviously, the last time I recorded was December 1st, I believe was when that episode came out. A lot has happened since December 1st. Of course, we had holidays, we had a new year. Not even just Sabre stuff. There's been a lot of things. So we're back. The Bills season is has ended in that regard. But of all things, even a major announcement, if you are not aware, if you for whatever reason you listen to this and you do not follow Bill's chat Twitter at Bill's Chat Pod, um one, if you love the Bills, go follow it. But we put out an announcement, Josh and I, that we are no longer with Built in Buffalo. If you are watching this, you can clearly tell, as this is only now released on our own YouTube channel. Um, and that is just something that we felt it was time. We appreciated everything with Built in Buffalo. We appreciated the platform and kind of the opportunity that it allowed for both Josh and I, with Bill's chat and then Bill's chat live and then this Sabres chat, kind of get our feet wet, really understand what we enjoy about this, and then truly grow as individuals within doing this podcasting and or recording, whatever you want to call it. Just the fun of social media, the fun of interacting with other fans through these forms of media. It's enjoyable to us. It really is. It's something we love doing, and there's a reason that we're still going to continue to do it on our own. It was our decision, I will say. We appreciate everything again with Built in Buffalo, and it was a mutual. Just we wanted to get back doing our own thing. There were certain things personally where we just wanted to get that fun of being our own podcast and our own channel once more, and it just felt it was in our best interest to do so. So all the best to Built in Buffalo. They're going to be great. I mean, they put out a lot of stuff with their own channel and through their own forms of media, and we're just going to keep moving forward on our own. And we are very, very excited, both Josh and I, for both Bill's chat, for this Sabres chat, and for everything else we're going to do. We're very, very excited for what the future holds. But back to the topic and everything. We are back since December 1st. There has been, and I'm looking at this schedule right now. I'm not going to go ahead and count the number of games since, but it's been a large chunk of the season, large chunk. In that time, we finally saw where UPL was handed the keys to the car. I mean, it seemed like that happened earlier in the season. Of course, there was a stretch of games late October, early November where he had consecutive starts. Then they went back to Levi and Lukanen then, I believe, got hurt later on. They had to bring Levi back after first calling him down, so on and so forth. Just a quick recap of that whole situation, if you're, of course, aware. Um, it Since I last recorded, I find it funny. The timing of me coming back. This is an episode where it felt right to come back for, and of course, the title of it is "How Did We Get Here." It's one of those ones where I there are a billion answers in my mind. There's an infinite number of answers. There's so many different things that have happened since the last time I recorded and throughout this entire season that it's just unbelievably disappointing that we are currently sitting here as fans and experiencing the season that we are putting up with game after game. And it's anything but consistent. It is one night, an enjoyable watch, a hard fought game. The overtime win in Minnesota was a very, very good game. Even when it was 0-0, that was a very good game to watch. The Los Angeles Kings game that we had with a rare Tuesday win, as if you follow me on Twitter, recognize that the Tuesdays are not exactly friendly to the Sabres, but that was a fun one. But then you have your lows. You have the Florida game that followed right after that Kings game, 4-0. They, I mean, they had every shot of manageable, and they just couldn't find the back of the net once. And on top of it, it's funny. Like it was what is it? The Dallas game, the St. Louis game, and that Florida game, with that one rare anomaly being the Kings game in that 4-game home stretch where this team put up 35 plus shots. 2 of those games were 40 plus. Los Angeles, I believe, or not Los Angeles, sorry. The Dallas game, I believe, was 47 shots on net. The Florida game, I want to say it was in the lower 40s, but 40 plus. And they combined for 2 goals scored in those 3 games. It's getting shots. Yes, you need to shoot the puck in order to score, but it was one of those things where, man, these guys are snake bitten. Something's going on where they can't find the back of the net. But on top of it, you really got to start questioning if they're getting true quality scoring chances. There were scoring chances in all of those games, by the way. I mean, you don't get 47 shots in that Dallas game without at least a handful of quality scoring chances. I believe it was the Dallas game where we had Dahlin rip it wide in the low slot. And it was just one of those ones where, as a fan, you could sense it just wasn't going to be your night. As me individually in the arena on a Tuesday night, I was like, here we go. This is a Tuesday night Buffalo Sabres performance. Even going back to last year when they were able to light the lamp left and right, it was somehow Tuesdays we would always lose. I'll get into that fun stat in a little bit just because I think it's one of the fun answers, if there's such thing as fun, of how did we get here, that I just like to lean into, because you just want to find an explanation of what's going wrong and why is it going wrong and what could lead to it. And sometimes you want to find the ridiculous answer because it's just funnier and you can just lean on that. But um, since last recorded, since all these games have happened, they have been consistently inconsistent. We all know that. I mean, the stat of stats when it comes to this Sabres team is the fact that they are currently, as of today, as of Tuesday, February 20th, they are 4-16-4 coming off of a win. They are only able to get points in the standings in 8 of those 24 games. Like, that is brutally awful. I mean, that's not even, this team should be competing for a playoff level. That is bottom of the barrel. You are the muck at the bottom that needs to be hosed off. You are garbage. And it's that alone is the standard and reason truly that I believe, and I'm sure most believe and understand that this team is not going anywhere with this season, and where the true disappointment and failure lies. They have not been able to string together results. And I say results because even those overtime losses, getting a game past 60 minutes in order to get that extra point, there's a lot of teams above them in the standings that actually have identical wins or lesser wins in regulation, but are above them in standings because they're able to push games to overtime more often and then are coming up short in that, whether it's the 3-on-3 overtime and or the shootout. So it's just, that is the standard. That is the big reason. But even when you look at it, I mean, this season has gone off the rails. Injuries have been not great. Of course, Tage has been in and out of the lineup. Skinner missed some time. I mean, all your big guns have missed some time. Matthias Samuelson's out for the rest of the year. Quinn, who was out to start the season, comes back, then unfortunately sustains another serious injury. There are just so many injury problems that have been happening with this team that when you reflect and look back on what happened last year, that was something they got lucky with. Injuries were not much of a problem last season. I mean, they were able to avoid a lot of major injuries, especially with key players, that then led to this other point that I'm going to get into where all of them were having career years. Tage Thompson, of course, Rasmus Dahlin, Dylan Cousins exploded. The only guy who seems to have maintained, if not improved this season, is JJ Paterka. And credit to him, he's grinding it out. He's still putting the puck in the back of the net in a somewhat consistent level on this team. And just no one else can do it, whether it's for those health reasons and or having a down year. It's kind of a mosh posh of both. But overall, between the injuries and then just the 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 failure in trusting that the all of these players that were coming off of career years were then going to continue off of that and maintain that. It's not a realistic thing to expect, right? The luck from injuries alone, you should count your lucky stars that you were able to avoid any serious injuries. You should never plan for injuries, but you hope for the best, plan for the worst, right? And last year you got the best, seemingly it felt like, and this team was just a few key saves and a few key games away from taking that last wild card spot from Florida, if not finishing better. And this year, the ironic part of it all is the one thing I can say that's been decent for this team has been goaltending. And I'd say decent, and that feels even a little bit like a stretch. But I mean, in that same 4-game stretch that we just recently went through at home that I mentioned and referred to, where they were getting plenty of shots and only 2 goals are scored in 3 of those losses. I mean, Dallas won 2-1. St. Louis won 3-1 with an empty netter. Florida won 4-0 with an empty netter and then a shorthanded goal after that. I believe it. I think it was a shorthanded goal. Maybe it was a power play goal. I left the arena after the third goal. I couldn't do it anymore. It's one of those things where it just can't all come together. And it's so heartbreakingly disappointing. It's like going back to it, you look at a team like in the standings, if you look at it, they're on top. We are just below the Red Wings. We're not actually just below the Red Wings. They are 12 points above us. But regulation wins, Buffalo 21, Detroit 21. When you go to regulation and overtime wins, Buffalo 24, Detroit 27. Okay. So they gotten a few more in actual play in overtime. But then they were able to get a couple shootout wins on top of it, and they haven't lost a shootout this season. They have 29 wins in total to just Buffalo's 24, like I mentioned before. It's one of those things where good teams, playoff teams, teams that are competing through the season are able to push themselves through games. And it feels like the Sabres will have those big games once in a while, but off of that, they don't know how to win those grind games. And they definitely don't know how to apparently win those games coming off of the highs of a win. It almost feels like as soon as they take that step forward, they're ready to take that step back and take a deep breath and relax maybe. You can't relax in this league. You can't take a breath. You can't sit back and give a B effort and expect to still get points in the standings and a win, and or a win and result kind of deal. Like you have to keep the foot on the gas and keep it going. You have to keep grinding out win after win. You have to win in many ways. And last year it felt like they were a team where they could kind of win in a multitude of ways. I don't want to say in plenty of ways because they weren't winning, grind fest 2-1 games. But if they were in kind of a physical 3-3 open game, they felt like a team that they could then get that fourth goal. They had games, the Labushkin overtime winner, where they were down multiple times, but they knew they always could score at any given moment. They knew they had plenty of talent that could get out there and get the goal they needed to either tie it up and or get the win in the end. This year, you can almost feel how a game's going to go in the opening 10 opening period. You can get a sense of if the team showed up for one, and then are they going to even be able to score a goal? There's a couple anomalies in there. The Minnesota game that recently was played was definitely one of them. That was a game where I'm going to be quite frank. I I expected the Sabres to kind of fall flat, and they didn't. They got that late tying goal. They win it in overtime, and that was a rare style of win for that team this year. That was a win that we saw this team do last year, plenty of times. This year, rare. On the flip, they also lost a game that felt really good early on in the Anaheim game that we just experienced this past Monday, where it felt, I mean, they allowed the one goal in the first period. It was 1-1 after one. But when Tage scores that power play goal to make it 2-1, it feels like one where it's like things are under control and things are fine. And I'm bringing up this game because it's going to lead me into kind of another thing here of how we've kind of gotten here. We've talked about the injuries. We've talked about the failure in expectations when it comes to all these players that came off career years last year, and we're just going to run it back with what it is. And because they're young, because they're still hungry, you can expect them to hopefully. Now, I don't even think they would have expected all of them, of course, to still maintain that. But I'm thinking they probably hoped that, let's say, over half of them would have. And of course, that's not the case. But the couple things that they did do to this roster that made it where they weren't running it back have absolutely failed them when it comes to signings and bringing them in. And the biggest one was highlighted in full on Monday. Erik Johnson is a prime example of how you understand what Kevin Adams and what Don Granato, the idea was in bringing him in. But if they thought that once you got to this point in the season that they were going to get anything worth of value on the ice, what they saw Monday should be clear as day that it was just not going to be possible because he was the problem. Play on the ice, he was a problem. It was embarrassing. Erik Johnson's a very, he's had a long career. He's obviously won a cup. He's done a lot of successful things in this league. He was a first overall pick, so he came in with high expectations even on top of that. He understands he's under scrutiny and he's under the watchful eye of a lot of hockey fans. He is a prideful person that I imagine when he saw that, he will watch it back, I will say, and he will not be happy with himself with that performance because it was awful. And multiple turnovers. I believe it was, I know one is the third goal, but even the second goal was the one down in the corner. It might have even been the first goal. I don't know. They were all abysmal errors. But one of them deep in the corner where he's trying to make a turn and turn up. I don't know what he's trying to do on the boards. Just basically coughs it up and then absolutely gives zero effort in trying to hold up the Anaheim player who then gets the puck to a free man cutting into the slot. Goal. The third goal, I know it was the third goal. Erik Johnson on his own blue line, just straight up hands the puck off, just gives it away to the other team and proceeds to be a pylon and do absolutely nothing other than wave his stick with one hand at the player who's just flying by him for Anaheim. Leaves Ryan Johnson on a 1-on-3 with no ability to do anything. There's zero fault on Ryan Johnson for that third goal. And unfortunately, it was a goal. It's you can't you can't rely on youth and you can't rely on all of this to continue to grow and then bring in there's veteran presence and there is value in that, of course, in the locker room. But then there is still the need for that guy who's a true top four, who's a true dependable player on the ice, on the blue line as that veteran presence throughout the entire length of the season. Ryan Johnson is someone I fully expect, and we will have another episode in a couple of weeks, the next episode right before the trade deadline, talking about who I expect to be sell. Because look, the Sabres team ain't buying anyone at the deadline. They are selling. Eric Johnson is going to be the number one guy I imagine moved. And it will not matter. I don't I think Eric Johnson's just a body you have to move because you want to just play other players down the stretch. The season is lost. You want to evaluate. It's a perfect time to do so. You need to just kind of lick your wounds and utilize the remainder of the games in order to evaluate what you have in house, what you have through your development system, whatever you have at your disposal. You want to utilize. You want to see. Give them a kind of a tryout. So Eric Johnson's gonna be gone, and honestly, good riddance. No disrespect to him as a person. Again, no disrespect to him as a player in his career, but boy, relying on him to give you meaningful minutes, when injuries come up. I mean, the funny part is I mentioned last year that they lucked out with injuries. Matthias Samuelson's one guy who's kind of trended in that uncomfortable place where it doesn't seem like he can remain healthy for an entire season at this point. Still young, still has plenty of career in front of him. But at this point in time, health has been a concern. He gets banged up. I mean, he plays a physical game. It's just the nature of, what comes with his style game. But with that in mind, you're now left there with Owen Power when still healthy, who is also out now, of course, Rasmus Dahlin, and then Eric Johnson. I mean, Yoki Haru is probably in that mix. Yeah. And then the other signing they bring in, Connor Clifton. I mean, poof, he was really rough at the start. Seemed like he figured it out a little bit there, but there are still glaring issues with him. It's incredible to me the difference in Boston Bruins, Connor Clifton, which again shows you just how good of a roster the Boston Bruins are, and then what you're getting out of Connor Clifton on this team. And that could also be a little bit from another point I'll get into real quick later in the episode. But Connor Clifton, Eric Johnson, these are guys that you should not be leaning and depending on for more than 12, 14 minutes of a time in any game on any NHL roster. And you left yourself exposed with one injury having to depend on one of those two guys for 20 plus minutes because one of them is going to be linked up with, if still healthy, Owen Power or Rasmus Dahlin, or I mean, whatever the situation is. Yoki Haru is most likely going to slide up with Dahlin when Samuelson's out. So then, therefore, Owen Power needs a playing mate. You're probably going Connor Clifton in that regard, but Eric Johnson could be that guy too, one injury away, so on and so forth. It's Ryan Johnson, who in his youthful way has looked good. I mean, he's had issues. He's made rookie mistakes. In the Florida game, he kind of got exposed a little bit at times. The one giveaway that led to a goal where he just got his pocket picked. That was an error with a Ryan Johnson that you're like, he's still adjusting to the speed of the NHL. Like that doesn't happen to him in college. That doesn't happen to him at the University of Minnesota. That happens to you in the NHL. That probably even happens to you in the AHL, to be quite frank. But you live with those mistakes with him. He's not going to be a guy you're depending on for that. It's a failure in roster management. It's a failure to the season because you left yourself truly in that exposed state where then you in these late games, which could have been meaningful. At this point, they're not. The season's lost. But the expectation was for these to be meaningful games. The expectation was to still be in the playoff hunt at this point. And if you then were an injury or two in on that blue line, Eric Johnson, this is the Eric Johnson you would have been seeing. Imagine if the Sabres were in the playoff mix and you got that performance out of Eric Johnson against Anaheim and we lost this game. Imagine how much more pissed off as a fan you would have been. Like that is where my head went to. I laughed at it because it's a Monday afternoon. I'm actually working at this time. It's on, kind of the side monitor, stuff of that nature. But it was after the fact. And when I reflected on the game, I was like, man, could you imagine if we were relying on Eric Johnson in the capacity that we are right now, but that game mattered. Oh, oh man, I don't know if he'd be able to go out in Buffalo. Like should be thankful that the games aren't mattering anymore at this point. And he is closely out the door. Um, wish him all the best, but I would be shocked if he returns after the March 8th trade deadline. So, but back to Connor Clifton to then lead into the last point of how did we get here and kind of the true reason that I believe that we find ourselves dealing with the disappointment of the season and the outcome of what's transpired. It feels to me like I don't know if it's necessarily the message or the coaching itself, which I do believe is a part of it, everything like that. But Granato and the coaching staff just don't appear to be capable of coaching in game. Like they might do well in practice and player development, of course. That they have all Granato specifically, of course, has all the history and track record to show that they're good at player development and they're probably great in training, in practice, so on and so forth. But when it comes to game management, when it comes to coaching with games in mind, when it comes to getting the team to play in a manner that wins games in the NHL, it just feels like Granato doesn't quite have it. It feels like there's even decisions being made, whether it's with Granato and or Kevin Adams, such as letting Michael Pekka leave your organization as he was working in Rochester, who did great for them. The Rangers clearly saw that. They needed an assistant. They needed someone that could run the power play because that individual was no longer there due to getting promoted, and therefore hired Michael Pekka to do that job when you had him in house, and instead, for loyalty reasons, maintained your relationship and assistant position with Matt Ellis, who's running your power play. And you have the Rangers with Michael Pekka operating at a click of the fifth best power play in the league with great talent in New York. But the Sabres, when it comes to power plays, have great talent on their own. And I believe at this point in time, they're 25th in the NHL. And it is the hardest thing to watch with this team. Outside of team defense. I mean, team defense is horrible. But if you had to pick something else because team defense was even bad last year and they still got by, if you had to pick something different for this year, the power play is clearly the one thing that if you asked any fan on the streets, like, what is the most disappointing part about the play on the ice? It's the power play. It's, you're not getting good looks for Tage Thompson regularly. It's almost too predictable on that side of the sheet. And then they just don't understand where to go with the puck otherwise. They don't know what to do. Even zone entry on the power play is a struggle, and it's hard to watch. And no disrespect to Matt Ellis. He played in the NHL, but Matt Ellis wasn't playing on power plays. He has probably a great understanding of the game, but whatever he is doing just doesn't work at all. And it's borderline fireable what his product is in running the power play and how things have been handled in that regard. The icing on the cake and the salt in the wound is the Michael Pekka on the Rangers coaching staff, coaching an elite power play. I mean, one that when the Rangers go on the power play, I mean, when I was in the stands in MSG on December 23rd, watching Rangers Sabres, as soon as the Rangers went on the power play, I was scared. I was like, that's a good unit. It's great talent, and they operate at such a high level. They really do. They know where they need to be. They know where to go if things are getting sorted out wherever they need. Their zone entries are phenomenal. Puck movement is just a chef's kiss of beautiful. I mean, they are just a finely tuned machine on the power play. And the Sabres struggle to put two passes together once they even get into the zone. Very rarely, it feels, 1 in 10, they'll actually get good movement on the power play. They'll make something happen, and then you'll get a Tage one-timer like you did against Anaheim, and boom, puck's in the net. That's 1 in 10, it feels like. Other than that, then they get other power play goals, of course. I mean, Okposo had a really nice tip goal on the power play against LA in that recent home game. Um, but coaching has been, in my opinion, a major, major reason for the disappointment in the season. And that hard conversation, it's not necessarily about Don Granato himself being a bad coach. I just think the time has come. The message may have even gotten stale, or you have just hit that plateau where unfortunately he is just not the type of individual that can get you over that hump to get to push the players to be detail oriented, to get them to play good team defense. I mean, we've seen almost, you know, 1 3/4 seasons of poor team defensive play. They can still win games, but it's just not good. Like, it's not sustainable. It's the you have to play good defense. You have to play good five-man hockey in order to continuously win games, to regularly do it, to string them together. I mean, it is that 4-16-4 record off of a win is the most embarrassing thing. That is I it's inexcusable. And I do think, yes, all the things talked about already. Injuries, down years for the guys who had career years prior, not hitting on your free agent, veterans that you've brought in with Eric Johnson, Connor Clifton, not getting a goalie. Although, again, the reason I don't bring that up is because I think goaltending as a whole has been a little bit better and a little bit more dependable and consistent this season compared to last. UPL has had numerous games. He has 4 shutouts on the season, which ties Ryan Miller for as many as he's had in a single season. Although, whole nother discussion with Ryan Miller. Ryan Miller, famous for letting a puck trickle in late while he's trying to deal a shutout, the old Ryan Miller shutout. But you're getting good play out of UPL, whereas last year, it did, even when UPL was playing well, it still felt like he was going to let in 2, 3 goals. So you had to, depending on the shots. So you had to pick up the scoring. You had to play well in front of them, and they did for the most part, especially down the stretch for the most part. And then you had Levi come in young and hungry and maybe hold them to 2 goals, if not 1 goal once in a while. And it was like, oh, maybe we do have this something. Well, unfortunately, reality sets in that Levi is still young, still needs to figure out the pro game, still has never experienced even the pro grind when it comes to the travel and everything of that regard. That it's like you shouldn't have been leaning on that. But luckily, UPL picked it up again and he figured it out and he's developing well still. He's still younger. So, developing is a word that I am very comfortable saying with UPL. But um, it's the only reason I don't go there. You know, would have been nice if they brought in a goalie? Yes, of course. If they got a guy like, anyone. I mean, Thatcher Demko, if he was available, sure, just to throw out a name. I mean, there was the Hellebuck conversation with Winnipeg. He then signs that big extension, stuff like that. But back to it, you bring in the veterans, you don't hit on them with Eric Johnson stuff. But the biggest reason in my eyes, how we got here, why it's been a massive disappointment and failure of a season, to me, is just coaching isn't good enough. And what is it going to take? I'm not going to get on a grandstand and say firing Don Granato, but I just don't know if there's any other way out of it. I don't know if there's any other solution to it. And overall, I think if you have a guy like Craig Berube out there available to be your head coach, who is regarded as I mean, he did great things in St. Louis for years. He's the one that got them to their cup, of course. And he always has, it seems to be in regarded as a detail oriented, hard working coach that gets his teams to play hard for him. That All of that right there sounds like exactly what this roster needs. and you have a lot of young talent on this roster. You have a lot of it locked up already. You now need to get the right coach in that can push them further, that can get them to play a team game, that can get them to play winning games. And I think Granato has done a great job for what he can. He has gotten this team to a point that I believe to be the best that he can. And it just feels like time to get something else that can get you to that next level. And it does suck because it felt like, Donnie Meatballs, Don Granado was someone that it would have been fun if they could have made the playoffs with. He deserved it being he got this team to where it was, especially at the end of last year, um, from where it was when he was first handed the keys to the car. But overall, that is just the reality of it. Some guys are not built to bring teams to that next level. They're not built to bring them to the playoffs. That's just not in their DNA as a coach. That's just not how they operate. And I do believe that this is one of those circumstances for this team, for this organization, where, w- you know, let's say it's Kevin Adams doing this. Of course, a lot of times coach and GM are linked, but Kevin Adams has to make this decision after this year. I do believe the right decision would be to move on, find a guy like Craig Berube, bring him in, if he wants to run this team and get them moving back in a positive direction while also instituting a better team hockey that then, it starts in the back and moves forward. If you can play sound team defense, if you can have a strong blue line with good goaltending, the goals will come, the confidence will come, because the biggest thing that gives all of that to you, that confidence especially, is winning. And you need to win, and you need to win regularly. That is how you maintain confident play. That is how you do big things. And that is how, of course, how you make the playoffs. So, just a few of my thoughts and reasons why this team and why this season has gotten to the point of where it is. Um, excuse me. I appreciate you listening. I appreciate everyone stopping by. It's fun to be back. It really is. I look forward to being back. I know Josh and I, with our Bills chat stuff, also look forward to getting back to it. Um, the NFL draft's coming up. When it comes to Sabres, though, I mentioned it before. I still am going to do this every other week, as I started doing late there, back when we were still with Built in Buffalo. Just feels good. It feels like a good sweet spot for hockey. Just feels like, every week is a little bit much. Um, it's not as fun to talk about week to week, because especially in a season like this, even when it's winning, though, it's just what more do you have to say game to game? But with a couple weeks, you get a little bit more of substance to really dissect. Maybe more topics come up, things like that. But next episode will be dropping in March time, just a couple days before the NHL trade deadline, which is Friday, March 8th. That'll be a fun one. I'll get into a little bit more of what I believe, from both what it sounds like, through media outlets, stuff like that. If something's already happened, of course, give my thoughts on that, but then also just reading the tea leaves, seeing what's out there, and then just where I believe that this team is at that point. What moves do I expect to be made? What moves should be made? What moves shouldn't be made, potentially? Wink, wink. Casey Middlestat. But overall, I'll be back in a couple of weeks. Give my thoughts on that. Hopefully, we get to enjoy a few more wins in that time. It looks to be 8 games between now and that episode, or I should say 7, technically, because the game at Toronto, or sorry, that's a Wednesday game. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, yeah, 7. There are 7 games between me recording this and then the next episode dropping. A couple tough opponents there with Vegas and Winnipeg at home late in that stretch. Of course, they have the Florida trip as well in that stretch. It'd be nice to win a few of those. But overall, let's just, take a deep breath, we're gonna have to kind of lick our wounds on this season. It feels like at this point as fans, it's massively disappointing. But I will be back in a couple weeks to talk about what we could expect probably at the trade deadline. Give my thoughts on that. Give my thoughts on any trades that may have already happened at that point as well. And everyone, it's good to be back. And you all have a great rest of your day or evening whenever you have enjoyed this. And I appreciate you all for stopping by. Leave a comment below on any of your thoughts. Tweet at me at Sabres Chat Pod if you have any thoughts on the Sabres. If they're negative, I get it. Like I said, even in the early part of this podcast, but always appreciate positivity too as well. But have a great rest of your day and enjoy your time. This is Sabres Chat. I am Luka. Take care.